1 week after one of the biggest beatdowns of the season, the San Francisco 49ers headed back home with one goal in mind: sweeping their divisional rivals and winning the NFC West. Now before we begin, I wanted to take a quick trip back to week 12. I know I said I didn't want to undervalue that game, and I meant it. Back in week 2, the Niners beat the Rams in their first divisional game, then in week 4 they beat the Cardinals to win their second, and finally in week 12 they would win their third. All 3 divisional opponents had faced the Niners at least once, and Seattle would be the first team to face them a second time. In the first game, off of a tip pass, Purdy would end up throwing the first pick 6 of his career, but he didn't let that dictate the rest of the game, and he still managed to put the game away after making the choice to throw a deep strike to what was becoming one of his favorite targets, Brandon Ayuk. A lot of people, including the coach, didn't think that ball was even going to be thrown to him, but Shanahan admitted after the game that it was one heck of a throw and then said something very interesting.
Very rarely does he check it down and you tell him he missed the deep one. He looks at it that way. Actually, he proved to us while the ball was in there it was the right decision.
Of the many narratives that the media and fans of other teams like to put at the forefront, the one that stuck out to me the most was that Purdy liked to rely on checkdowns. And sure, when you have one of the best running backs in the league at your disposal, the checkdown is a safe option. And in this play, right out of the coach's mouth, the safe decision was to actually check it down.
Nice reaction to Brock's touchdown pass there, kind of a little fist bump. What was your emotions watching that throw, watching that play?
I couldn't believe he was throwing it. The zone coverages guys were so deep, and which usually you can check it down right underneath them and get about 12, but Brock thought he could drop it in over the guy, and it was a clear view for all of us, and it was just a hell of a throw.
So if Purdy relied too heavily on the check down, why didn't he do it then? And see, here's the thing. If you've watched every episode of this series and have been paying attention, I've already answered that. Purdy, on the other hand, at any given time, at least in his first 9 games, if you really want to count the NFC Championship, didn't have just one main target. He had, if you count Kyle Juszczyk and Juwan Jennings, 6 different players he could throw to at any time, as long as it wasn't a run play. But if you wanted to see a visual answer to that question, then let's head to the game in week 14. In the second quarter, the Niners were driving down the field relatively well. But after Purdy saw a tiny mistake by one of the safeties, he made a choice. Purdy launches the ball and hits Debo while he's in stride for the easy touchdown. So, what does that have to do with the question I asked earlier? Well, for that, let's hear it straight from the sources themselves. Here's Debo after the game.
A couple weeks ago that you guys had made it a priority to get the deep ball going in the offseason. How do you think that's coming along, and how did it come together for you today?
It's crazy as we worked that play at practice. That was like the last option to be thrown. And so, Brock just being the quarterback he is, and just whenever he sees something, he's just going to let it go. As you can see, I really wasn't running 100 miles per hour. But once I looked back and seen Brock getting ready to cock and throw it, I had to speed up. But that's just something that we work on every year in camp, and we slowly progressing to get better at it.
And here's Purdy.
On the deep pass in practice, he wasn't the usual option on that. What did you see on that? Why did you do it?
Yeah, I saw Jamal Adams he didn't come down really, really hard, but I sort of saw his feet, coming down. He was sort of flat-footed, and I was like, all right, with Debo moving, I was like, we can get over the top here. And so took my drop. He wasn't necessarily the number one guy in the read. It was actually Juwan. But the way Jamal Adams came down, I was like, this could be a big one. So let it rip and let Debo get under it.
Now, by this point in the season, I was already a Purdy fan, but after hearing from Debo himself that he was the last read in the progression and didn't think he was getting the ball, it solidified the respect that I had for Purdy because of how quickly he made the choice to give Debo the shot because he knew Debo had the edge. He trusted his playmaker to make the play. And if Purdy relies too heavily on checkdowns, then that might have been the biggest checkdown in NFL history. And the crazy thing is, that wasn't even his only deep shot, as later in the third quarter, he would once again find Ayuk for a huge gain that would eventually lead into another touchdown. Purdy's efficiency was on full display in this game. But there was one other thing that I wanted to touch on, because one of the things that would make itself known after this game was Purdy being able to use his legs. even if people didn't notice it at first. You see, in a blink and you miss it moment, during the first play of the game, McCaffrey would take off on a 72-yard run that almost ended in a touchdown. But something would happen that would basically go unnoticed and really wasn't talked about except by Niner fans. You see, people talk about this moment because of the fact that Brandon Ayuk ran with him and made 2 crucial blocks that allowed McCaffrey to get as far as he did. But watch what happens when McCaffrey is tackled. Did you notice anything? You know, like the player who was immediately there to pick McCaffrey up? Let's see that from a different angle. See, I fully believe that Purdy was trying to catch up to make a block of his own to get McCaffrey into the end zone, and to the relief of many fans, he was a second behind. But the fact that he was the first one down there to pick him up after a 70-yard run was impressive, and it really started to call into question this idea that Purdy didn't know how to run or use his legs. He made the effort to get down the field to help his teammate in any way he could. And while we're on the topic of effort, that brings me back to Debo's first touchdown. Debo himself said that he wasn't running at 100% until he looked back and saw Brock ready to throw. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know anything about what a football player goes through when the ball is snapped. But for some people, Debo's efforts on plays where he wasn't getting the ball was being called into question. But let's go ahead and put a pin in that for now. After sweeping the Seahawks with a 16-28 win, the Niners will move on to Arizona with one goal: sweep the Cardinals and claim the title of NFC West champions for the second season in a row. Purdy would be playing in his home state of Arizona for the first time since being drafted, and would be playing opposite Kyler Murray for the first time as well. Once again, it would be number 1 versus number 262. Now, with the way both teams had been playing, and given their meeting in week 4, the Niners were the clear favorites, and they would end up dominating once again with a final score of 45-29. But how they got to that score really showcased how much of a complete team they actually were. Let's start with the defense. Even though the run defense was not great, and to be fair, they were missing 2 of their starting defensive tackles in this game, they still managed to disrupt the passing game enough, managing to snag 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. But it was the offense that showed once again why they were one of the most dominating offenses in the league. Let's start with CMC. In week 4, he had 4 total touchdowns, and in this game he had 3, becoming the first player since 2013 to score at least 7 touchdowns against a single team in the same season. And while his rushing touchdown was par for the course, it was his 2 receiving touchdowns that garnered some well-deserved attention. Now, the first touchdown didn't seem like anything special, but it really showcased just how fast Purdy was processing the game and going through his reads. The time it takes from the moment he receives a snap to the moment he finds McCaffrey in the end zone is 2 seconds. Regardless if you believe that it was a simple throw or it was a throw that any competent quarterback could make, the fact remains that it was an incredible progression, especially if you look at the play from behind. If you watch his head, he immediately sees that every receiver on the right side is covered and then sees McCaffrey and lets it go. And then there's his second touchdown. One of the things I found funny about this touchdown actually came from Nick Wright.
Any team in football because they set it up so well.
And we saw the play we showed, we can show it again, and this is, everyone thinks I'm going to try to bash Purdy. I'm not bashing Purdy here, but this is what he's talking about. This is a Kyle Shanahan touchdown.
I know, but you didn't think that was a good play from Brock Purdy?
No, I thought it was a good play from Brock Purdy. But the most impressive part of that play is that Christian McCaffrey, the most dangerous player on the field, can be so open that he can fall down, get up, and still be untouched into the end zone.
While I would agree that McCaffrey being that open has more to do with the design of the play itself, here is Purdy describing what actually happened.
The next one to McCaffrey, the deep one, he was also very wide open. Is that one where you are trying not to miss him? Like, do you have to, when someone's that open, like, gauge a little different?
Yeah, I mean, it was, sort of just like a off-schedule play, a bounce out of the pocket, and then I see him go down the field. And at that point, I didn't know, is he going to, continue to run straight? Is he turning to me? And so I just sort of put it up in the air, and he did a good job tracking it down, catching it, and then getting up and scoring. So sort of a tough, moment right then and there of what to do with where the ball should be, but we got it done.
And if you're asking yourself, how is McCaffrey able to be that open, then all you need to do is look at the play again from a different angle. Number 34 looked like he was responsible for staying with CMC, but as soon as he sees that Purdy has escaped the pocket, He stays back to stop him, and by the time he realizes that Purdy is throwing the ball, it's already too late. Now, this is just my interpretation, obviously, and I could be completely wrong, but it showcased the reality that as good of a player as McCaffrey is, and he is, it took 2 players to make that play special. So, remember that pin from earlier? What's interesting is that this set of plays I'm going to talk about appear to be the complete opposite of the last set. Because as amazing as that second touchdown pass to Debo was, it's actually the first touchdown pass that I couldn't believe actually happened. Why? Because Debo Samuel was completely unguarded. He was so unguarded that he appeared to jog right into the end zone. And then he spoke after the game, and my mind was blown.
Man, the crazy thing is we practiced that, and in my head I'm like, yo, no way, like this is going to be this wide open, but I came around and seen nobody, and Kyle put that in, and normally when he puts stuff in, it works.
Were you supposed to kind of just be, acting like you weren't a big part of that?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely was part of the play of going across and not being as fast to draw a little attention and just be lazy a little bit, and it worked.
Now look, no one will ever truly know whether or not Debo was acting unmotivated or not, but one thing is for sure, if Shanahan used that perceived laziness against the defense and scored off of it, it was a masterful move. I mean, we're talking chess versus checkers here. Now, obviously a play like that was only ever going to work once, but in that moment, it showed that you could never take this offense lightly and that every single player needed to be accounted for, even the quarterback. Because these games showed an aspect of Purdy's game that continued to go under the radar that would eventually lead to great things. But that comes later. First though, after clinching the NFC West, the Niners would head back home to face their toughest challenge yet. At this point in the season, the Niners were 11-3 and had moved into the number 1 seed position for the NFC. But on Christmas night, the number 1 seed from the AFC, the 11-3 Baltimore Ravens, were coming to town. And that's going to do it for this video. If you like this content, drop a like and leave a comment. To stay up to date, click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya in the next one.